So I've been a teacher, and I was a classroom teacher, but I've been a professor since 1995. I travel a lot for my job. I have a very narrow, specialized focus in teaching children who no one else thinks can learn. And so I get called to go all over the place and do some pretty exciting things. And I spend a lot of time on airplanes, which means I spend a lot of time talking to strangers. And then any time somebody asks me what to do and what I do, and I don't think about it, I answer, I'm a teacher. And then you know the next question is going to be, oh, you are? What do you teach? Graduate students. And most people who teach graduate students don't identify as teachers first. But I'm a teacher. It's who I am to my core. I now do lots of funded research and development work, but all of that work is done with an eye toward how can I be a better teacher in order to help other people be better teachers. So let's see, I would have expected that would have let me, there we go. I work with kids who have really, really complex disabilities. I'm now old enough that I sort of feel like I can use the word kids to mean anyone who hasn't graduated from college yet. And so I really am talking about that whole age range from birth until usually about 25. Most people don't know that in the state of Michigan, if you have a disability, you're eligible to continue to participate in public school through your 27th birthday. So they continue to provide special education services in the state of Michigan through what they call post-secondary, but that is offered through your local school system that does the K-12 work for everybody else. So it's that full range that I'm interested in. As a classroom teacher back in the late 80s and very early 90s in upstate New York, I worked with a lot of kids who looked a whole lot like this. So really cute little guys who everybody could see, well, maybe they do have potential because they're so tiny and so cute, and maybe there's something in there and we just need to find it. But for me, the most exciting work has happened over the last, the most exciting work has happened over the last decade as we've worked with individuals with increasingly complex disabilities who are older and older and older. And what we're finding is that literacy and technology and all of the ways that we can make the world accessible to people now has changed the game. And so, for example, one of our very recent projects, we are teaching adolescents and young adults who have the most complex multiple disabilities, so they need people to take care of every one of their needs, and they have severe intellectual disabilities, and they're deaf and blind. And we're teaching those guys how to communicate in a symbolic way. So they can't physically sign because of their physical disabilities, and they can't talk because of their neurological disabilities. And we're using 3D printers to print out these tactual symbols. And it's taking time, but we're teaching these adolescents and young adults who've had a lifetime of not being able to interact with the world in any way to start using these little things that look like blocks to be able to communicate in meaningful ways and to interact with the world. And as we keep pushing, we being my colleagues at the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies, Gary Bishop, who you all have met before, who's our partner in crime, and wow, has he opened up the world for us. As we continue to push the limits of who are these populations and what are we doing, it also helps us understand everybody that much better. So we have always been excited about technology and what technology brings for this group of kids. But it's also really important to recognize the barriers that it creates and how different technology is if you're a kid with severe disabilities. So for example, this little guy is sitting in a wheelchair that he can drive with his knees, right? He has in front of him, that is a communication system, probably about $10,000. It reads his pupils, so it's an eye gaze machine, and it's looking for where his eyes are converging on the screen, and then he dwells, or he continues to look in one spot long enough in order to have it say the message that he selected on the screen. So if you could see the screen, it's a grid with little pictures, and each picture represents a word. But imagine this kid's way that he interacts with the world. It's everything he does. He's got this screen in front of his face. And how much that actually limits his access to lots of information in the world. So we finally are at a place where we can start thinking about the ways that technologies are available and accessible to an increasingly complex group of children, but we also have to think about, what does it do for them? What happens when you're a 4-year-old who now is hearing lots of language, who can see anything that happens in the periphery and can see anything that happens up here? But he has no ability to see anything that's happening on the ground around him or from this height in front, because there's this big, huge screen that's mounted in front of his face all the time in order to give him a way to communicate. So there's this give and take, and we have to be aware of those things as we're trying to make some of these decisions. We look at, these are twins. Mom is very excited, got this new iPad, using it to interact with her son who has pretty significant multiple disabilities. But look at what's happening. The boy who has the most significant multiple disabilities isn't even looking at what's in front of them. He's looking off to the side. It's the kid without disability whose the world is available to him all the time. He's the one who's trained on the device. And this wasn't just some accidental snapshot. Like, you look at this and it's over and over and over again, that the boy who mom is trying so desperately to support through the technology isn't really getting the kind of access that we would imagine. And having his twin brother as the contrast is such a really important way for us to be thinking. So we have technology that allows us to give kids access to information, to help us teach them how to read and write and communicate. But we have to be super thoughtful about that. What is the impact of that technology, not just in terms of the opportunity, but in terms of the barriers that it creates? That this little guy might actually do better with a very different kind of presentation of information that doesn't make him divert his gaze, but actually gets his gaze. Just yesterday, I got I'm on several Facebook support groups, and I got a message from a mom who has an adolescent daughter who's just started to have massive seizures. Computer screens, all electronics, can actually induce seizures in people. And at school, it's a one-on-one laptop school system. And so all the kids are working on technology all day long. Okay? Then add to that all of the required testing, she's a 4th grader, that she's going to have to take this spring is now all delivered online. And the doctors have said, you need to completely eliminate all screen time from this kid's life. Well, forget about the fact that you have a 10-year-old girl who has to hand over her cell phone, her iPad, and everything else. Now you also have a kid whose whole school is wired for learning that's technology-based, and it's making her sick in order to do that. So we problem solved a little bit. You know what? There's a pretty simple solution that will allow her to have some access to at least the literacy learning and information that her peers are doing online, and that's to do just what this is. So take it off of the computer screen and project it up with an old-fashioned light-based projector, and this is not going to induce the seizures. You would notice a huge difference if you're in classrooms where they had LCD projectors in the front of the room in order for you to, follow along in a 3-hour lecture versus one with a projector. This is going to be less strain to your eyes, but it really importantly for this girl, it's not going to induce the seizures that she's going to get if she's looking here.
So an LCD projector would?
That a projector, an old-fashioned light bulb projector, you're good to go. Any of the projectors that are actual, so this, I'm blanking on the, you know how we have the cable, this one? The minute you plug into that kind of the old-fashioned I can't remember the it doesn't say on here. The minute you plug into one of those, it changes the flash rate And it's not, so you have to know what's the problem with the kid, right? That's my issue, right? So for her, there is this opportunity to get an old-fashioned, not the ones that you can get to through an HDMI, but the ones that you can connect to through here. And it's going to change that refresh rate to a level that now she's going to be able to tolerate it. And so now they have a potential option for her to be able to do things like just keep up in school, where all of their books, everything they do is all delivered digitally. And we all think that this is awesome for kids with disabilities, that we can have, the world is available now in a digital context. So you know what, there's a whole bunch of kids who actually, it makes them divert their attention. It's hard for them to visually attend. And then there's a whole group of kids who might be very interested in attending, but it actually makes them sick. It makes them have seizures to be able to look at that sort of electronic presentation of data. We also find that these kids who have severe disabilities that have access to technology, there's always an adult attached to them. There's just always an adult attached to them. And imagine when you were 12 years old and in middle school, if every single thing you did all day long, you had some middle-aged person attached to you all day, every day. It's more of an issue for all of the boys that we know, because they never have male caregivers with them at school. So you have, you know, somebody who's oftentimes older than your old mom is, who doesn't know anything about your reality, who's the person who's now interpreting, translating, and deciding what you should have access to and not have access to. Right? So you end up with a teenage girl who is really excited because she finally has figured out a way to get into her photos, but somebody else decided what photos she should have in there. All right, well, y'all just have to look at your own photos to know the ones that you're interested in are probably not the same ones that the rest of the world wants to go back and look at. We keep going, and we look at, again, here we have two teenage boys. Both of them have intellectual disabilities. They're in a setting where they get to have their own tablet all day, every day, and there is always an adult mediating their interaction. Down the road at the elementary school, there's no adult there. These are kids huddled around, looking at things together, figuring out, engaging in problem solving, getting that aha moment that kids need to have. But when they have significant disabilities, they don't get that same opportunity. In states like North Carolina, the kids that I'm interested in with the most significant disabilities are almost always educated exclusively in separate settings. They spend no time in their school day with peers without disabilities. Now, before I became a professor at UNC, I was up at the University of New Hampshire. The University of New Hampshire, in that state at that time, there were no special ed classrooms. All children went to the school that they would go to if they didn't have a disability, and they were in grade level classrooms that they would be in based on how old they were. And as a professor at the university, I trained teachers who were getting dually certified in both general ed and special ed from the beginning. And so while when it's only kids with disabilities, there's always an adult in the middle, if there's a mixed group where most of the kids don't have disabilities and one or two do, suddenly those kids start supporting and learning from each other. And so we have this bias that somehow adults help, but if you look at the way kids use technology to access the world, to become readers and writers today, for every 1 minute they're spending with adults, they're spending 20, 30, 60, 120 on their own, engaged in literacy, engaged in communication, engaged in learning about the world without an adult constantly mediating it. And we have to be really thoughtful about that and continue to develop ways that we can help kids have more independent access and more of that socially mediated access with their peers. How can we take advantage of? But you look at whatever today's du jour version of Snapchat and before that and before that and before that, none of those tools are accessible. They all require you to have good manual dexterity. They require you to be able to see. They require you to be able to engage with little tiny buttons. And that is so much of the social interaction that kids without disabilities have as they're learning about the world. And kids with more severe disabilities just don't get access to that. As we think about the kind of content that kids with disabilities have physical access to, so here's a little boy who physically, he can't use his fingers to point, he has to use his whole fist, and he reaches out and touches the screen, and so he really can only accurately access two sides of the screen. And so it's dramatically changed the kind of content that he has available to him. So really, every time he goes to learn, he's taken a test. It's just a test all day, every day. Touch the red one, touch the green one, touch the big one, touch the little one, touch Elmo, touch Bert. Like everything he does is the computer giving him a direction and him responding in this binary way. Okay? And if he gets it right, usually something happens. If he gets it wrong, he hears and then he goes on to the next one. Well, imagine what learning would feel like if every single event was actually a quiz or a test instead of an opportunity to explore and figure it out. And when we think about technology and we think about the ways that we engage with the world, you know, like in my house, it's, well, let's go ask the Googler. I don't know, let's go ask the Googler. Like we are just consumers of information all day, every day. And if every time, I don't know, I'll get on and if it's a website that's asking me too many questions before it lets me in, I leave. I don't want to stay and answer your 5 questions before I get to what I want. And for many of our kids with more complex disabilities, their entire day is a test. And they don't have the option to leave. He doesn't have the ability to say, I don't want to be here, I want to go somewhere else and do something else. There's also a ton that we figured out about these differences in the ways that we've helped kids with disabilities learn how to interact with and use the technology in order to learn about the world. This is not somebody that I know, but she looks just like somebody I do know, who would constantly say to me, just leave me alone, Karen, I'm doing my work. Just leave me alone, I'm doing my work. And this is what she looks like. Well, if you have a young adolescent who's this engaged, right, like they're just looking at that screen and their hands are going and they're typing away, you would assume there's something happening here. All that was happening here was that she was copying text from everywhere she could find. She didn't understand that text. She was just copying, so it looked like she was doing what everybody around her was doing. Well, once we start figuring out that that's what she's doing, then we can start saying, well, all right, how do we make that more meaningful? And so one of the things that we did that was pretty simple is we just turned on in Google Docs the option to have it read back as you're typing, so that in the very least, as she's typing words, copying words that she's seeing around the room, once she's typed it, she then hears what it is, right? So that we're giving her some feedback to begin not just engaged in, for her meaningful, but in terms of long-term learning, not particularly meaningful tasks. So we want to look also about how it is that kids are interacting. What are they interacting with? What are they finding interesting? How do we build on those things that are interesting to them? How do we support them in having much broader access to information? How do we think about not just, oh, cool, everybody gets a laptop, but what are we going to do with those laptops? What are the tools and resources that we can provide? How do we support kids in interacting with those tools and resources in ways that we know are meaningful to other kids? How do we get the social piece of that going, because we know it's a critical component of the reason most of us get onto our electronics for one reason or another. We also spend a lot of time thinking about some of the assumptions we make. Because we have access to technology, we often do things thinking that we're helping kids, that actually the research bears out to say we're making it harder for kids by doing some of the things we're doing. So here's a couple of examples. Text-to-speech, so sort of screen reader technology. It used to be you had to pay for it. Now it's free on just about everything. If you have a written document, there's some free something on your computer or your phone or your tablet that will read it back to you in a pretty simple way. So that exists now. There are pay options. Like there's one that I like very much called Snap and Read. The thing that's really cool about Snap and Read is it will take any document, it could be, or any text on the screen. So it could be Flash, it could be PDF, it could be anything that's on the screen, and you snap it, and it will read the text that's on that screen. The other thing it will do, if it's truly a digital text document, is so something that is, so it will respond to text to speech in natural ways. You can snap it and simplify it, and it will automatically simplify the paragraph of text that you've selected. So that's been a really important tool for lots of the kids that I work with who are in general education classrooms but aren't able to read and understand language as well as their peers. There's been a ton of attention in the US over the last decade around how do we make sure that all instructional materials that are used in public schools are available in a standard digital format that makes them accessible to the broadest range of people with disabilities possible. The original population was people who were blind and visually impaired, and so the original focus was, how do we take all the text that's used in public schools, K to 12, and make it digital so that people who are blind and visually impaired can listen to that text? Very quickly, that went from just that population to the entire population that's called print impaired. So that would include people with dyslexia or language disabilities, people whose disability keeps them from being able to read. And it's been interesting because the original law specifically excluded people who couldn't read because of the level of their intellectual functioning. Okay? So we'll give you access to digitized text if you can't read because you can't decode the words. But we won't give you access to digitized text if the reason you can't read is you can't remember them, you can't, right? Like you have other reasons why you can't read. There actually is a standard, the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standards, and any digital text or any text that is purchased with public funding now is increasing requirements that those texts have a digital version that is available following this NIMIS structure. And any digitized text that's available in this NIMIS structure then can be read in any number of free or for purchase screen reading kinds of technologies. Bookshare is a link that I provided that you can follow from whatever your course website is. And Bookshare serves even if you're print disabled, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can apply to get a Bookshare license for free, and they will provide you with access to textbooks and other things that are in a digitized format to be able to have it read aloud. Many of the digitized formats are just flat PDFs, and not all screen readers can manage those. So we have this NIMIS, we have this way that kids across the country through Bookshare, if they have a print disability, can get access to the tools that their peers are learning, and they can listen to the text or do supported reading from the text, and this is going to solve this huge problem. Everybody makes this assumption that, oh, if we can make it possible for you to listen to it, then you're going to understand it. Right? It couldn't be further than the truth. This article, I shared it last night, and so it's being shared on the course website. Okay. And partly it was because I was trying to figure out how to explain this, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I have a graphic in that article, and sure enough, there was one. This is a group of 51 kids who, school age, so 3rd through 8th grade, who are known to have language disabilities, learning disabilities, specifically dyslexia. And that's that population of kids who we make this assumption that if we just give them access to books that they can listen to, we'll solve their problem and they can have access to school, right? Like, they'll be fine. And in fact, if you look at our group data, when we went in and assessed these kids, what we found is that for the group of 51 kids, on average, they could listen with comprehension above grade level. So this negative means that they're actually above grade level in their ability to listen and understand text. And on average, they were 2.3, 2.29 years behind in their ability to read words. So this is a group of kids who is absolutely right if you're going to make this big generalization to say, wow, we should give them access to text in digitized format, because if they can listen to grade level text, they're going to be able to understand it, and then they'll be fine academically, right? Like, this is great. But you look within that group of 51 students, only 33% of them listen at or above grade level. And in fact, 8 of them listen 2 or more grade levels below their grade level placement. So they're 8th graders, but they can't understand text above a 6th grade level. And so we think, oh, well, we'll just give them all, we'll sign them up for Bookshare, we'll give them all access to their textbook in a digitized format, they'll listen to it and they'll be just fine. No, they won't. Because they don't understand listening to text at the grade level that they're at. It needs to be simplified in some way. These 2 poor kids, 3 or more grade levels below. So they're 8th graders, but they have to have 5th grader lower listening to it in order to understand it. Reading, being able to read it independently is likely even worse than that. So we make these assumptions that, oh, well, now we can take our whole library and we'll digitize it, we'll give every kid a device in our school, everybody will have access, and we're good to go. Well, even among the group of kids who most people assume that's the right solution for, it's not for all of them. We have to know who the student is, what they need, and we have to look more carefully at what they can read and not read, and what they can listen to and what's too hard for them. As we think about providing kids with access to digitized text to be able to listen as the way that they access information and improve their literacy skills, the first thing we want to know is what's their listening comprehension level. And another link that you have on your website is to the Universal PAR, UPAR, from a company named Don Johnston. You can actually do that free of charge. There are school systems around the country that use UPAR anytime a teacher raises a red flag about a student. So anytime they're concerned about a student, they use UPAR in order to look at how well, what's the highest level that the student can read silently and remember and answer questions? What's the highest level that they can listen to digitized text on the computer read and understand and answer those questions? And what's the highest level that they can listen to a human reader read and answer those questions? And there is a much larger group of kids than most people realize who do best with a human reader, way better with a human reader than they can do with a digitized text. And so we want to be looking at, like, what if we're going to use digitized text to support a student, what's the level that they can be successful at? And let's make sure that we're giving them text at that level and not leaving them frustrated because they're already doing it differently than their peers are and they still don't understand it. Because now it's different and it's still too hard. So if we're going to make it different, can we at least make sure that they can be successful with it? Because it's a whole lot easier to be different when it works for you. But to be different when it doesn't work is just incredibly frustrating and leads kids to shut down. So we want to target the text at this level that they can listen. And then for kids with much more significant disabilities, people are not thinking, oh, they can just listen to the 8th grade text. With those kids, we've made this assumption that if we create this stuff that's called picture-supported text, so we take their software now that lets you do this, you just type the text or you upload the text and you click a button and it matches these little pictures with each one of the words. Baltimore Public Schools did this with their entire elementary school library, posted all of them up online after spending, you can imagine the effort that it took, number one, to get all of those texts created into a format that then you could upload them and add all these picture symbols to. Well, number one, it was a huge copyright violation, so it got taken down pretty quickly after it went up. This does qualify as the individual adaptation that you can make for individual kids. And so typically when we used to think this was a good idea, we would suggest to schools that they would create this and put it on a CD and put the CD in the back of the book in the same kind of pocket you use to put your library card in, right? Like, let's just put it in there so the adaptation lives with the book and isn't online for anybody in the country to get, which was really where Baltimore public schools went wrong. But here's where else we went wrong. We now have 4 decades of research that says when we do this, it makes it harder for kids to learn how to read. It makes it harder. Well, the reason we're doing this is to help kids who need help learning how to read, right? And so then people say, well, I'm not really doing it to help them learn how to read. I just want them to be able to access the information. And having those pictures helps the kids access the information, right? In fact, it doesn't even do that. So here's an example, right? This, I will give you a big hint if you're in my age category. This is a line from a children's book. Don't cheat. Because if you go to the next slide, you're cheating. But look at this and see if we'll go ahead, work with people around you, submit a note if you're online and you think you can figure out what this says. It is a sentence from a children's book. C. C? Is that what you think that word is? Okay. C.
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones. C. Indiana Jones.
I.
Your syntax is kind of falling apart here. C. Indiana Jones. I.
4:30.
Is there anything that you look at and you're like, I'm pretty sure that way? You think this one is play?
Yeah.
All right. What else do you think you could like say? I think. Like, what do you think this one is?
Tree.
Pretty good bet.
One
Yeah.
before it is like going on.
Sorry.
I don't know what's going on in the one before it. Like somebody like
This one? Yeah. Fine. Just me, a little bit nervous. Right? These picture symbols are super common. They're used all over the place with kids with developmental disabilities, particularly when they can't use speech to meet all of their communication needs. This software that allows us to go in and add all of these words to match, or pictures to match each one of the words, makes parents and teachers feel like they're doing so much. I adapted all these books. My kids are being really successful. But in fact, we have a room full of really smart people who probably, when I reveal what this is, have read this book more than once in your life, and you don't know what this says. The reason we're using the symbols is to help people who can't read the words have different access to it. But in fact, the only way you can figure out what the symbols mean is if you have the word to go with it. And as adults who are highly literate, we can't not read text once it's there. We can't not pay attention to words. It's how billboards work, right? If you actually stopped and pay attention to the words that were on the billboard, we would have a huge problem on our highways. But as adults who are highly literate, as soon as you've seen text, you've read the text. And so when adults see that,
Wait, what?
right? And then they can go, oh, all right, I get why that's after. C comes after B.
No.
Right? Dead serious, this is happening in schools. The highest selling literacy, I use that in quotes, curriculum for kids with developmental disabilities across our country ships like this, week after week after week, to tens of thousands of classrooms across our country. And then we wonder why the kids aren't learning how to read the words. What the research shows us over and over again is because they're looking at the pictures, and y'all won't remember what this says tomorrow because each one of you is looking at something thinking, really? Really? Yeah. Like, no, that's not that's play. On my VCR, right? On my video, on my phone, that symbol means play. It doesn't mean right? So we have just all kinds of problems with this, but everybody makes the assumption that if I'm going to adapt, I can adapt the text and then it's going to work really well. Right? There's some researchers right now who are doing work on this, and they continue to say, oh no, it's improving kids' ability to comprehend. And I'm going to argue it's not improving their ability to comprehend at all. It's improving their ability to figure out which answer is the right answer. Right? You don't even have to read those words. If I ask you the question, who's the main character? and there's a picture of a guy in a red shirt, a yellow shirt, and a blue shirt. Which one are you going to choose? Yellow, right? Like, I don't even have to know what a main character is. I just am looking, and there's red and blue and yellow, and well, there was no red guy and there's no blue guy, so the answer must be yellow guy, right? Like, and so there's just this. If we're going to think about, we have all this amazing technology, we have all of these ways that we can make the world accessible, and we're not being smart enough about it. We're making assumptions that actually get in the way of kids being able to learn, instead of recognizing that, you know what we could do instead of, this is from a chapter in Hatchet, and the way people are making Hatchet accessible to kids with more significant developmental disabilities is by doing this. Well, what if instead we just made a really, really simple version of it that helped kids, one sentence and one picture, one illustration at a time, get a sense of what happens to Brian chapter by chapter throughout that book. That is what we did when we created Tar Heel Reader, which you all heard about from Gary Bishop, right? Who's our collaborator in computer science. And the thing that's been really fun about this work together with Gary is Gary can, you know, make his computer sing and walk and dance and do whatever you want it to do. Like, he's an awesome computer scientist. He is constantly pushing the limits of what's possible. He says about this all the time, it's just stupid simple, right? And he, on a weekly basis, gets one or more requests from the field saying, can you make it do? One of the very first requests, the day that we released Tar Heel Reader, was, can you make those little picture symbols show up above each one of the words? No. Well, we can, but we're not going to, because, right? Can you make it highlight the words while it's reading out loud? Well, we can, but we're not going to, because actually having it highlight word by word by word is going to get in the way of your developing fluency as a reader. Because when good readers read, actually by the time kids without disabilities are at Christmas time of first grade, when they're reading, they're not reading word by word. They're no longer pointing and saying one word at a time. Their eyes are actually making the same kind of saccadic movements that our eyes make, taking in more than one word at a time in order to use the surrounding context to help confirm what it is that they're doing as they're identifying words one at a time. So as we're thinking about what are the things that we need to do, and we're trying to think about kids with more complex disabilities, we're thinking about technologies, we're thinking about what's possible, we're doing a lot of work to remember that technology and technology-based solutions don't always deliver what they promise, that sometimes features actually get in the way of learning, that we have to understand the learner's profile, what are their relative strengths and weaknesses, and that we have to remember that what it is that makes learners without disabilities want to engage with technology, and how do we make sure that we're providing it. So that's that, get the adult out of the middle, and then keep it simple, right? Okay, I just realized what time it is. I'm going to stop now. Should we swap and then we have questions after? Okay.
Thank you.
Hey.
All right. I'm Karen Diaz, is the mother of a 10-year-old with ADHD and a 6-year-old with autism. She came to the United States from Mexico 11 years ago, and she's also an advocate for parents of children with disabilities. There's her only experience of looking for appropriate services and resources to fit her children's needs. Karen has also been able to offer support and advice to families in similar situations. Thank you, Karen, for joining us.
So, hi. So as you can see, my main language is not English, so I will try to do the best I can. If you have any question, please, or if you are not able to understand what I'm saying, please let me know. Okay, so I really want to give you my personal story about what I've been doing with the family. So I had a chance to work with Latino families from El Centro Hispano. I don't know if you are familiar with this place. So I went through a program called Mother Read. So I went to a training to help and support families to achieve the reading for the kids, because in Latino families, we don't have that to read with our kids every night. or every day for 10, 15 minutes. So it is what we're trying to do, supporting the families. So over the program, I have to visit the library with these families at least once in the program. So I run the program for 4 times a year. So it were like 4 times we have to went to the library. One of the problems we had there, first thing, it is really hard to find someone who can translate. It is really hard to find someone who can do the tour around the library. So how are we going to participate there? We don't know what it is in the library. How are we going to get the resource from there? We don't know what the library offers. They have a bunch of resources for us, but we don't know. Another big problem I had there as a person who was looking for this service and opportunity for other families is, I went there, I made the, let's say, appointment with this person, but she never showed up. Every time I have to wait at the door. Is she here yet? Is she here yet? She never showed up. Every single time. I worked with a center for 2 years, and it was the same thing every single time. And as you see, I don't feel comfortable to do a translation. So, but I was in the obligation because I have this group on me. So I have the one who needs to explain everything to them. Also, another big problem is, okay, it was a group with families who have kids smaller than 5 years old. You cannot be around doing a tour in a library with a bunch of kids less than 5 years old. Yeah. So with weeks of anticipation, I was looking for a place to drop off for kids. They say, yes, you can be in this room or that room. The day when we get there, it's busy. So what we can do with our kids? We provide the teachers, but if you give me an open space, I cannot have control of 12, 15 kids at the same time. So there are a lot of barriers we have to go through. And one of my biggest concerns for all of this, it is the persons at the reception. How are you going to get a library card to get the books you want for your kids if they're asking you? I want valid North Carolina ID. No, most of the people or some of the people cannot get one. I need a bill with your address and your name. The situation is hard for people, so sometimes we're not able to share a bill with our address because we don't have one. It is always someone in the house who have all the bills on his behalf. We don't have no. And another thing it is, I don't think nobody have a passport all the time in their wallet. It doesn't make sense. So it's like, no, we cannot give you that. So why are you coming to me and tell me, use the resource, especially the ones in Spanish version, but how am I gonna get access to them if you don't give me a card? I'm gonna be here if I don't have a card. So there is a lot of problem we have to face to get the resource at the library. And in the other hand, I want to talk to you as a mother of my kids with disabilities. So as Amelia told you, I have a 6-year-old, he has autism, and I have a 10-year-old ADHD. So how you can work with your 10-year-old who needs to do a project or have touring, but you have another kid who cannot be allowed in the library. What I'm talking about, I've been asking to leave the library because my kid is too loud. I cannot share my phone to keep my kids sit down in the time I'm helping my other one. So it's like with the tour he has, can you drop off Jonathan at the door? I'm gonna wait here for you. Can you pick up Jonathan at the door because I cannot get in? So it's really a problem when they send you the security person to put you out of the library. It's like, what in the world? My kid has the same rights that other kids have, but that is not possible because it is a quiet environment. But I think we should do something to be open, to welcome all these families. honestly, I don't go to the library. I don't use the resource I have there because I am afraid at any minute the security person will show up there. Like, you have to leave, or you need to put your cell phone in your bag. Like, I have something to do here, but how? You have a bunch of resources. How? I cannot even learn how to look for a book because there is no time. I cannot afford to pay someone, okay, can you stay in my house because I need to go to the library. I think the library is for the kids to expand their learning, their love for the books. But if I'm keeping my kids away from there, there is no way. There is no way. So another thing we have to face as kids with disabilities is if we go to a kids session or kids time in the library, it is hard because as my kids have sensory issues. So he cannot be in a loud space. He cannot be too close to other kids. So there is no way. We have to walk away all the time. As me as an adult, it happened like a month ago. Jonathan needs to turn in a project, but our printer stopped working. So I have to go to the library, say, what in the world? How I'm gonna deal with this? What I did, take my kids, one with a cell phone, the other one with an iPod, and put it next to me where the computers are. But I cannot even enjoy the time because I'm just looking. Where's the security? Where is the security? And shh, 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 all the time. So I really would like for the person, or I don't know how to call, la presidente o quien organiza las librerías. No sé qué.
The director of the library?
The director of the library, yes, to think about options for us. One example is to have access at least one day, 1 hour, few hours a day, where we can go with no fear. We have to leave. So other thing it is, maybe it is possible to have someone who knows how to deal, or at least how to recognize what will people need. Because it is not the same when you have a kid with autism, dyslexia, any kind of learning disability that you cannot see. You see a normal kid, says, why I have to be different with these kids? I cannot see the disability. You cannot. But I know how to deal with that because it is what I have to do every single day. And it is not just for me. It is from this group I am part. It is the same complaints all over the time. I cannot get the resource because there is no time. I am not allowed to. And sadly, we have to stay away from the library. It is our treasure we cannot dig in because we have no choice. So there is any question? Comments? Something you want to ask?
So you said a day or a special time where kids who have sensory needs, special sensory needs or different needs could go. Are there other things that would help make this space more welcoming? You talked about the security. Yes. So I mean, like, what other things? What other things do you think might make this space more welcoming for you?
I think one of the biggest help we can get, it is the information. Information for the person who works at the library. I think it is hard to educate all this person who works there because it's not like 10 or 20. It is too many libraries. But at least to have the basic skills to recognize when you have to be a little bit more patient with a kid instead of just pushing you out. It is like a warning sign. Yeah. To be more, let's say, open mind for those. And in the time, specifically time for our kids to be at the library, one is the sensory issues. The other one, it is a time who not just the families with kids with disabilities know about it, because my kid is really loud. So I would like to love to have like a sign in the door. So Tuesdays, 11 a.m., sensory friendly or whatever, so other people who are there doesn't become upset because it is really noisy. Obviously, they are there because it is a quiet place where you can work, but it's like, okay, what I'm doing here, this is happening. So I would like for them to have the opportunity to know. So it will be a choice. I want to be there or I want not to be there. Any other? I'm really nervous. This is the first time I'm doing this, and it I'm sorry.
No, it seems like the movie theaters have started having special times for moms with infants. They'll have special times when the lights are on during the movie so that children with autism can have less sensory overload. They turn down the volume. Seems like that should be happening in our public space, like a library.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is like, I can give you an experience. I did try to pull my kid into a regular movie. He was scared, completely scared. It was for my son's friend birthday party, and I had to walk away 5 minutes because it was too loud, too dark, so nothing worked for us. So right now, with the sensory-friendly movies, everybody's making noise. So I feel like, oh, okay, you're good. You can do that because everybody there know what we're doing there. We're not really looking at the movie. Us as a parents, we are teaching our kids a different way. They can expand, they can learn, they can be with other kids around them, and we can feel normal. It's the word. We can feel normal, like, okay, I don't have to apologize here because it is what it is. This is a time for us. So that is a really great idea. Yeah. It is really far. Those times is like once a month. And it is really early, 10 a.m., but it works. It really works.
Yeah.
Any other question or comment? I would like to hear from you two. What do you think about it? Maybe I'm asking for too much. I don't know. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that even I have a son with autism as well. He's 11, but even I understand your experiences completely, and you know, even in places that you think wouldn't be a problem, like amusement parks. My son is obsessed with roller coasters. It's one of his things. So we go to amusement parks, and sometimes he gets the sensory overwhelm and he screams. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And people say horrible things, and we're outside. We're literally outside. But because, you know, he's reached a certain age where I guess kids aren't supposed to scream anymore. You know, I won't use the phrase that I overheard while my kid was screaming because it has bad words in it, but I can feel your pain at night. I think you're really brave for sharing it. So
I want to share this story that happened in a supermarket. We were in the line to pay, and I have Jonathan, my oldest. So obviously he can completely understand. And I look at these two persons, the cashiers, talking to each other and looking at my kids, staring at us. I thought it was because we're Latinos. So, I mean, it happened very often. So it doesn't bother me. When we walk out, Jonathan told me, Mom, why you don't say anything? Why you don't speak up for my brother? Like, what happened? I don't even notice. They say my brother, it is that. He break my hair. I don't hear. My 6-year-old doesn't listen to them. He was doing other things, but it is his brother. Yeah, it is his brother, the one who has to pay the price. So it is like, okay, this is a supermarket. It is noise all over the place. What is wrong with you? I did file a complaint.
Good for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe my language is no the way it should be, because I can learn more and more, but I'm not quiet. If I have to speak up, I will do it the way I can. That's why I'm here. Like, okay, I'm going to try to do it, but okay. Be patient. This is the first time I'm really talking with students, with professionals about my case. What we've been doing these past few years.
So I have a question.
Yes.
If you could get, do you want to sit? I feel like.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can pick this.
Yeah. Yeah. You sit there and I'll just move there.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. If you could ask, because usually we have folks in the library too, right? So they were actually really interested in hearing what you say. If you could ask for a program or programs, what would they be? I mean, in terms of related to literacy, or books or reading or anything, like anything.
I was not ready for that question.
Okay, you think about that.
Yeah, but I think for small children, it will be really helpful to expand the section where the puzzles are and add more literatura. No puedo decir la palabra.
Literature?
Yes. Yeah, because that's a really nice way for kids, like my kid, can learn and expand his language and ability to communicate with other kids, but they're not enough. It's like 14, 15 puzzles in each library, so that's not enough. Also, I would like for them to have like blanket with words on the floor so we can work with them. Match this, match that. So, because some of the kids doesn't like books. Like David, he's really into books. He loves books. He is reading a little bit, yeah. And but before he was no anything about books. Or if I hand the book, he might pick it up. And we don't want that. We don't want that to happen because the resources at the library are great, and I don't want to be like, okay, my kid did this, and then I'm coming next week, and here is another one, so that's not okay to do it. So some material for the small kids, and for the older kids, we love a program. You can include literatura.
Literature. Literature. Fiction? Fiction? Or?
No, solamente hablo sobre la lectura. Libros.
So just books, reading.
Yeah.
Reading books.
But another really way, it will be like introduce music. Yeah. Instead, used to have like this book, the one you were talking about it, but have music in it, like songs. That's what I've been learning with my son. He's been able to understand and to learn from that. That is one of the resources I can think right now, but if you give me time, I can give you a bunch of ideas, of course. If you give me a grant, I can work with you to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems incredibly doable to come up with some way to think about getting some funding to do some training for public libraries that we could do locally and then disseminate more broadly, and that at least helped people get some sensitivity for at least, and to be more patient and to think before you just assume, oh, that's a parent who can't control their child, or that's a child who's being a bad kid or something. Like, no, actually, this is them being their very best because they'd like to be here, and to have some sensitivity to that.
So to be fair, the folks from Durham come every week.
Yeah.
And so they've been coming to hear people talk about all sorts of topics all semester.
Yeah.
And one of the sessions we're going to have, actually two of the sessions. So one is on, one is Kim Tizer, she's coming from the Autism Society. So she's coming to do a training session specifically on working with patrons who are autistic. And then at the end of the semester, we have one librarian who is on the spectrum himself, and who's going to talk about like library services.
Great.
Yeah.
That is great. It is good. It is good to see, for me as a parent, to see someone who is working, who is in the spectrum, but it is working. He's able to. He reach his goal. So it is like.
Oh yes. There are librarians with PhDs. There are librarians with master's degrees.
That's great.
I have I guess, a little comment. It starts with, you were saying that you identify as a teacher first. And right now I'm in a course on library instruction, but librarians don't typically think of themselves as teachers. Like, that's not what we typically think of ourselves are, but we are. So it's like, if, we're trained to work with, kids with disabilities, or be aware of these things, then we can teach others as well. It's like, okay, this isn't a problem. Like, we don't think this is a problem because, this child is acting the way that they are. But having this space teaches others, I think, as well, that, about how to interact and react and who's allowed in spaces. I don't know if that makes clear sense. Okay,
Yeah.
It is really a great comment, a great idea. So as what happened with me, with my family, we have no clue what about autism was. I mean, I have like idea, but when it comes to me, to my children, it was like, but I thought it's never going to happen to me. So it is a big change when you see someone and you look at them. It's like right away, oh, something is happening. She cannot control the kids, as you're saying. It's like, don't judge. You don't know what's happening. Your mind changed like that. So, and it's what I will, my family, to keep working on it. So I think if I can educate my family, I can share with others. Yeah, at least the basics. Yeah, it's not specifically autism, but in everything.
Any other questions? For Karen, for either Karen. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording, and I'm going to give us a break, and you all can think if you have any questions. Folks online, thank you for joining us.